Well, good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode 927. And this is for the 23rd of October, 2023. And we're glad you're here. It's the Monday night weather party. This is the pre-show, this magical, marvelous, amazing time where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say really, really outrageous things. So hope you've had a good day, good weekend. Had the chemtrail guys on me this weekend. I mean, it was rough in the trenches here. So we had where we are down here in the lower latitudes, we had high level cirrus blowing in from an eastern Pacific tropical storm by the name of Norma. Came across Cabo, and then it's dissipated now over Mexico. But the upper winds were taking the high moisture up across the southern U.S., and we had a cirrus shield Saturday and yesterday, both days. And with the lower sun angle, you can get some pretty remarkable sky optics. I mean, we had it all. We had the arcs, we had the halos, we had the sundogs. It was just a classic case study in sky optics when you've got cirrus clouds, and those are ice crystals. It's way below freezing, and they act like a prism, and they can split the light into colors and create these amazing effects. And I started getting images Saturday, and within no time at all, they were just all over me. I mean, it was bad. Yeah. It was, and they're not nice people. And you know, if you want to believe this stuff, fine, but they're just not nice. I mean, they threaten you. They make these threats and all these outrageous claims, and it's just it's like people should have more things to do with their time than to become chemtrail advocates and action team members and all this kind of stuff. So I've dealt with them all day Saturday and all day yesterday and even today. So it's and you know, I think for some of these guys that some of them are actually sincere. They believe it. For a lot of these guys, they don't believe a word of that. They're just trying to plant a bug up our backside. And I don't know. But anyway, we're very thankful that the cirrus shield is thinned out, and hopefully we will not have this problem tomorrow. It's been rough in the trenches, Bill.
Sorry about that, James. I'll make sure to send you some more serious pictures as soon as they come.
Oh, man.
I sent you a sundog yesterday. That get them upset.
I am convinced they have a chemtrail action team. If they see any meteorologist posting cirrus cloud pictures, they will attack you. And the allegations are, number one, you were paid by the government to cover up the spraying that is being done.
Deficit with if they would quit paying you for
I mean,
this misinformation.
Yeah, there you go. That's the whole problem there. But yeah, we're cover up agents for the government. And and we know that we're being poisoned, and
that's true, but just not the way they think.
But I had over 2,000 pictures of sky optics, 2,000, and I've not had a chance to see them all. It just takes time to go through them, and some of them are just absolutely stunning, just incredible. But yeah, it's been pretty rough in the trenches here. I'll just kind of leave it at that. In fact, I should pull up some of these. Were just incredible. These images.
It was a heck of a sundog yesterday. Hey, Ted.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Afternoon,
I guess I should say for you guys. We're going to be switching to standard time here pretty soon, and it will be evening here at this time of day.
That's true.
We're less than 2 weeks away from falling backwards.
But that's what it looked like.
Yeah, we only could see the right side, really, where we were. But you got a whole bunch of, you got a whole arc going on.
Oh, it's you got a 22-degree halo, the two sun dogs, an upper tangent, and a peri arc, which is at the top of that thing, and you can't see it above that. There's a circumzenithal arc. I mean, it was
you name it, geometry lesson.
We had it.
Pretty spectacular.
And
thanks,
I like that. That was my favorite there.
Yeah.
So this horse was photobombing the
photo. Yeah.
Because you love a good horse picture, don't you, James?
Well, I would prefer a cow, but a horse will do fine. But you can see the whole thing there. It's just outstanding. But one guy said he knew where I lived, and he was going to come after me.
Do you just have the police waiting in your driveway every?
Yes, it's just like In fact, we had a strange situation at the University of Alabama football game. There was some guy drunk up where I work up there, and he was screaming. And this guy was drunk as a skunk, screaming horrible obscenities.
About what?
F Saban. I mean, he was
Is the man insane
of his lungs? And Alabama was doing poorly. It was the first half. And I said, and nobody did anything. Nobody did anything up there.
And I'm thinking so fast.
What's the matter with you people? I threw him out. I said, you're out of here. Get out now, out. Because that's where I work. And this stuff's going to get on the air on those screens if he keeps screaming like this. And he started to walk out, and then he turned around and came right back at me.
Ooh.
And I'm thinking, this is going to get good. Man, let me tell you what, I might be old, but I
was going to say, you're down there lifting all those tires and stuff every day. They're not mess with you.
And with a drunk, you can take him out really easily. And somebody just needed to, detain him while the police came.
Well, he should have his privileges.
And I had two bouncers with me. And they were in another room down the hall, eating something.
Eating some barbecue.
Yeah, they basically were.
Well, Jen did the same thing on Saturday after the Ohio State-Penn State game. She was not happy either.
No.
Well,
I wasn't belligerent and drunk, but not that I would admit.
Yeah, but I stood. That big old drunk came up at me, and I just stood right there. Said, "Come on, bring it." And he decided better.
He better not be cursing the president now.
And he turned around and walked out. Of course, the police were on him in a matter of minutes.
Good minutes. That should have been seconds.
Well, hello.
That's me. Sorry.
That's that guy calling you up.
I got
you're talking bad about me on the air.
Yeah.
I missed James. I missed why were they coming at you?
Well, there was this drunk, horrible drunk who was screaming.
Time to call. Everybody start a webinar in 1 minute.
The president of Alabama.
This guy was screaming F Saban, F at the top of his lungs.
Must have been
on the bridge of the stadium where I work and do my videos up there. And and nobody did anything. Everybody just sat there and nobody did anything.
Oh, man.
And I said, what's the matter with these people? Yeah. So I went right up to the guy. I said, you're out now, get out of here now. And I told him, I said, being drunk in public, it's a bad look for you and your family and your employer. You get out of here now. And he walked off still screaming obscenities. And then he came right back at me. And I just stood my ground. I said, come on, big man. You look.
Let me use this workout skill I've got.
Yeah. Listen, you got the wrong guy here. I don't swing wild. I drive it like a nail right into your nose, and you will drop like a fly when you're drunk.
These hands are registered with the Tuscaloosa police.
Yeah. But he got up real close to me. And he decided it would be better for him to just leave, which means he's chicken. And then
watching.
No,
bring it on, buddy.
But this guy is probably married to somebody, and he's probably got kids. And how embarrassing is that? If that happens to me, shoot me and bury me upside down out here in the parking lot. Just take me out. I mean, no, it's not.
Troy over there for some security at these Alabama games. James.
Damn, I walked in at a bad time.
James is taking on all comers tonight.
Really?
Welcome to our television viewers as we join the TV side.
Clean it up.
Yeah. So it's our Monday night weather party, and let's get this thing started. So, Ted, can you hear us okay? You're good on your audio?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And you're off the phone, so we're good to go, right?
Yeah, sorry about that. It's now turned
That's
off.
no problem.
So,
Okay. No, it's
problem.
hey man, it never stops.
yeah,
all right.
well, the unsolicited phone call, shall we say?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Oh
Get
yeah.
a few of those.
All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 927 for the 23rd of October, 2023. October 23. Glad you're here. It's a marvelous time of the year. It's just outstanding here. The only problem, some of us are in drought conditions. Some of us have been in drought conditions, but where we are, it's October. It's the driest month of the year. And I see a stranger that just popped online. Ladies and gentlemen, the doctor is in the house, Dr. Neil Jacobs. It is an honor to see you, sir. How have you been?
It's been a rough go the last few weeks, but I'm glad to be back.
And I know you're on a tight schedule tonight, but we are delighted that you were here. How's the weather up on the East Coast?
It's nice. We had I actually went camping with my kids' scout troop the last 2 nights, and right after that cold front came through, it got clear and got cool, and we cooked out the other night. It was pretty good weather. Fall is here for sure.
Yeah, I had the Philadelphia Phillies Diamondbacks game on. They're playing up in Philly, and it looks a little cool and crisp, and just some
Everybody's
typical
got their jackets on.
It's
fall,
October.
yeah, there you go. Hey, if you're playing baseball and everybody's wearing jackets, that's a good thing.
And
In
it looks
fact,
like we're going to get a 7th game in the NLCS too.
Yeah, it's fat. I think this might be the best day of the baseball season.
Yeah,
you got that going
it's
on,
up
and then
there.
you got Texas and Houston for Game 7, which should be starting here in a minute. But this is not baseball brains. This is weather brains. Let's go down to Troy Kimmel, who is in Austin, Texas. And Troy, how are you doing?
Well, I look over at the National Weather Service MMTS, and we're 72, which is not bad. And we've had 1.5 inches of rainfall today here.
Ooh,
in the rain gauge, and so that's been good. At least it's like it'd be like James Spann getting in a fist fight with the drought. It probably dented it a little bit, but anyway, inside joke.
yeah.
But bottom line, no, it's getting a little better here, but we're not quite there yet. Next couple of days, maybe a couple of more inches of rain, maybe before the early part of next week, and then a cold front on the way.
Oh yeah, everybody's talking about that blue norther coming down the line next week. It's going to get cold up north, really cold, and already we've got some winter storm watches and warnings up for parts of Montana and some of the adjacent states up there. And let's just say that Rick Smith is out this week. Rick is at an undisclosed location with very scenic conditions. He sent us a picture today, so Rick is
he's on our side of the world.
Out, yeah, and Kim should be here shortly. But let's go up to the Arctic Circle and Jen Naramore. Jen, let's review the Ohio State Penn State game if you'd like.
I would not like.
Sore subject.
I would not like.
Yeah, that was a dark 4-hour period for me this weekend. I can't really explain what happened. I don't know. It was just not. It was not pretty. So
yeah, we're shifting from baseball brains to football brains now.
That was not. I had a lot of confidence going into that, and we did not play well. I'm not sure what went on, and I questioned some of the play calling, and so anyway, I'm glad to be past that, and we'll see what happens against Indiana on Saturday. But it's not too Arctic Circle-y up here right now. It is. We're actually getting ready to go up well into the 70s. I'm going to really enjoy that the next few days before we do get the colder air for Halloween time. But the next few days, we're way above average, about 10 to 15 degrees above. So I'll take it. It's a little treat.
A little Indian summer, huh?
That's right.
Bill,
That's incorrect.
No,
incorrect statement.
And boy, HR will be all over. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So no,
I can't call it that in my weather history.
No,
No.
no.
It's completely off the board. Huh? Okay.
Oh,
Gotcha.
No. So let's bring in Kim before we get in trouble here with HR. And because for those that don't know, those that listen, you can say whatever you want to. The thing is, this is on broadcast television in addition to being on the podcast side. So we have to be very careful about our language. And Kim is always very choiceful and thoughtful in her language. Kim, how are you?
I'm great. And I have to say, I am pretty good at staying clear with HR, in part because I'm married to HR. So whatever you guys are talking about, don't tell me. Don't tell me.
And I'm immediately writing that down as a potential show title. I'm married to HR. Sounds
like a sitcom.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a great show title. So, Kim, how's your weather? How are you faring there? Hot, cold, in between, just right?
It's really pretty awesome. It's a kind of a maritime air mass right now as we're waiting for the impending rain. So we're going to just get a nice bit of rain for a couple of days, and it could cause some episodic flash flooding. So that's something for everyone in this area to be aware of. But otherwise, I'm just really excited that we get some precipitation. We've needed it. It's been nice to be clear, but can definitely use that rain.
Clear for our viewers. Can you refresh where you are?
I'm in Norman, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. All right.
The weather capital of the free world. And so, Bill, let's bring in our guest with the melodious tones there and the fancy background.
James,
bring him in.
Tonight's guest of WeatherBrains served as the WCM at the National Weather Service in Seattle from 1977 until 2018, specializing in decision support and enhancing forecast systems. In retirement, he's remained active in emergency preparedness, serving on various committees, teaching at the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, providing weather support for major events, and contributing to Snohomish County Radio, a graduate of Oregon State University in atmospheric science. He is also an amateur radio operator and can be found at Tornado Ted 6 on X or Twitter or whatever we call it these days. Ted Buehner, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad we got it worked out. I'd seen your blog and some of your posts, and I was very excited. We're always fascinated with weather in the Pacific Northwest and your career. We seem to have had a retirement theme here lately, James. What's the deal? Everybody retiring on this show, or what is the deal?
Not me. I'm just getting started.
Yeah, start those rumors.
I'll tell you what, you put it this way, Bill. Once you retire from one profession, then you can be repurposed as another form of a meteorologist. How about that?
I love that you used that term. That was great. And it's good afternoon to you right now, since still afternoon where you are. But Ted, we'd like to start out. Tell us what put you on the path to a career in meteorology.
Well, I need to ask everybody here on the panel, does anybody recall or know about the 1962 Columbus Day storm? Anybody here?
I'm going to ask you about that.
Yeah. I lived through it in the Portland, Oregon area as a youngster. And for those who don't know about that storm, and many don't because they weren't born yet or weren't in the area at the time, but that is the strongest non-tropical windstorm to ever hit the lower 48 in American history. So imagine winds along the Oregon and Washington coast hitting 150 miles per hour. And from Eugene, Oregon, northward to Vancouver, British Columbia, in excess of 100 miles per hour. That storm knocked power out from the San Francisco Bay Area up into British Columbia. Unfortunately, it had 46 fatalities, hundreds injured, thousands of buildings were destroyed. And it blew down timber from the coast to western Montana, 15 billion board feet of timber. That's enough lumber to build 1 million homes. On my street alone were 160 downed trees in the West Hills of Portland. Had no power for 10 days, no school for 10 days. And remember, this was leading up to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. So pretty eventful type of deal. Here I am, a youngster. I'm in first grade, and I had to ask the question, why did this happen? And my mom, who was also a scientist of her own, shared some books. Basically speaking, I got hooked. So by the time I was age 10, I was starting to do forecasts for my local school. And in high school, as a senior, I taught the Earth Sciences Weather Unit for the sophomores and got credit for it. And of course, you mentioned, Bill, that I went to Oregon State, got my degree in atmospheric sciences there, and started with the National Weather Service in 1977, and had more than a 40-year career. So that's the Cinderella story, if you wish, with regards to the Columbus Day storm and how it led to where I am today. And it kind of mirrors the movie Twister. You remember that at the beginning of the film, where it challenged her to find out what happened to her father in that tornado event.
Wow, that's a great story. So you started with the Weather Service in 77. Did you spend a lot of time in one place, or did you move around like a lot of folks do?
Moved around a lot. Portland's where I started, came to Seattle as an intern in 1978. Moved to Boise, Idaho, and served in that office for a year in 1982. Came back to Seattle in late 1983 as a part of, at that time, they had a ocean services unit, so I was a marine forecaster in that group for a few years, and then became a lead forecaster at a pretty young age 29, down in Portland in 1986. Then went to our Western Region headquarters in Salt Lake City in 1992, serving as the public aviation and marine program managers for the Western U.S., and then got selected as a warning coordination meteorologist for Seattle in 1994, as the Weather Service was ramping up in its modernization at that point, and served in that position for over 23 years before throwing in the towel, if you wish.
Before being repurposed.
That's right, exactly.
So Ted, when did the Weather Service start the WCM program? You had to be pretty early in that process.
Oh yeah, I was the first one, and among the first ones that were selected in '94. They were filling positions. You remember, they were state forecast offices back in that era, and it was right about 1995 where we had the new Weather Service offices, at least that were serving the state of Washington and Pendleton, Oregon, as well as Spokane, Washington. And that's when they had their first WCMs, the Warning Coordination Meteorologists, along with the science officers, the SU, if you wish. I always teased my SU, who happens to be the AMS president today, Brad Coleman. I always teased him that he was our Mr. Spock.
So yeah, he was the smart guy, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So tell us.
Bill, I lost your audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill has gone away.
Well, we can see him. Question is, can we hear him? He's making some adjustments as we speak.
So while he's doing that, I started first grade in the fall of 1962. We have to be about the same age. We got to be close.
Yep, I think we are exactly that.
You mentioned, the events of that time. And listen, I didn't go to kindergarten. It didn't exist when I was in school. You just go to first grade. That was the first grade where I am. And in the fall of 1962, my first few months of first grade, we had that Cuban Missile Crisis going on, which was just terrifying. They would show these horrible videos of people's skin just burning off their bodies. And we were like 6 years old. But the one thing I'll never forget about that was we had these drills to get under our desks if the nuclear missiles were coming in.
Yep.
And me and my friends were thinking, what good is this going to do? You got nuclear missiles coming in and we're going to get under these little wooden desks? No, we all made an agreement. We were going to go out there and watch the end of the world with a front row seat. We were going to melt down on the playground. But yeah,
that may still get your chance.
You're back, Bill.
Tickets.
Yeah, I don't know. My microphone did something weird there. I don't know what it did.
That was odd. That was odd. Really what we did, James, is in our first grade class, we drilled on moving over to the brick wall underneath the windows that faced downtown Portland, so that when the blast occurred in Portland, the glass would go over the top of us and miss us from the, impaling us with glass, and we might have a better chance to survive.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
People
used to
think
be-
it's weird now. You should have lived in the 1960s. It was really weird. And
Yeah, my-
soon after that, the high school boys started going to Vietnam. We didn't know what it was
Yeah.
or what it meant, but some of those guys weren't coming back. I
Yeah.
never thought I'd live to be 18 years old. Never, never. And then I had a bad situation with an electric fence and urination, and we'll talk about that on the next show, Bill.
I've never heard that story.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
shocking
Yeah.
story. I
Yeah.
think.
well, I was triple dog dare to pee on an electric fence in between first and second grade. So between the electric fence, the nukes, and the Vietnam, I'm not supposed to be here. So
And I think you probably
You-
thought
you
the bomb
didn't
had hit. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't put your tongue on a frozen pole, did you, by chance?
No,
No.
our latitude is so low. I don't have that opportunity. But the electric fence thing is bad. I mean, there was smoke. There was smoke and stuff coming from places I can't talk about here. I mean, sparks. It was. I was convulsing in pain, and my friends were laughing and
Oh, of
pointing
course
at me
they
while
were.
I was
Yeah.
dying. I mean, so
Yeah.
Bill,
How
I
did you
didn't
get
mean
to
to take your show down the tubes.
927 without ever hearing that story.
Well, welcome, Ted.
Yeah, Ted's about to hang up, and he's out of here. He's gone.
Yeah,
he's
he's
done.
good.
And back to
Fucking
our
hell.
regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Tell us a good story from your career, Ted. We've had some good stories on here before.
Oh my
but
goodness!
what's a good funny story? We could
Oh,
use
I don't
one
know
of those
about
tonight.
funny. The first one, when you have a career, there's always some highlights, right? I think we've all had some kind of a highlight, and so the very first one for me was I was working the aviation forecast desk in Seattle, and this was May of 1980. And in the weeks and months leading up to this time period, there had been a certain mountain in Southwest Washington that had, shall we say, stomach pains and had a growing belly.
Yep.
And then on the morning of May 18th, 1980, it erupted. So we're talking Mount St. Helens here. And at the aviation desk, and again, we're a statewide office at this point. So I've got all the aviation forecasts from the coast to the Idaho border. And there was this red phone on the aviation desk that never rang. It was the so-called hotline. Well, that morning at 8:32 a.m., it rang. And that phone connected us directly with the flight service station down at Boeing Field. And the flight service individual called, and Seattle weather, and he basically said, I need to patch you through to a pilot. And he's flying around Mount St. Helens.
Oh.
And that's all he did. Then he patched me through. That was it. And now I'm talking to the pilot, and I swear, this pilot, by the way, he was one of those Gilligan's Island 3-hour tour type of pilots. He had 5 passengers on board.
Wow.
And the language I was hearing in the background would be described in the world of movies as R-rated. Okay. So they were on the south side of the mountain when she went.
Well, they had a
Their
good view.
aircraft, if I can use the pic, their aircraft went vertical when it went, and he spun off towards Portland. And that's when he radioed flight service and said, I need to know how to get back to my home base at Chehalis, Washington. So for those who don't know where that is, it's about halfway between Seattle and Portland along Interstate 5. So anyway, so he's asking me, how in the heck can I get back to Chehalis? The mountain just blew, and where's the plume going? Now, we had been doing plume trajectory forecasts for a number of weeks at this point. So the winds aloft, we're taking it to the east-northeast. I think we all recall that, at least most of us that were born and around at that point. And so I told him just to continue on towards the mouth of the the Cowlitz River, which is empties into the Columbia River at Kelso Longview, and just follow the river all the way back up to Chehalis, and you'll be fine because everything will be far to the east of you at this point. So, but like I said, the colorful language I was hearing from his 5 passengers is something I will never, ever forget. And so at that point, hang up the phone. I turned to my lead forecaster, Paul Gurria, and I said, Paul, the mountain blew. We had already drilled on this. We had been talking with USGS, the Forest Service, Cowlitz County, other authorities. We've been planning for this for weeks. So we rolled out, and this is the days of the old emergency broadcast system. We activated no other radio and got that warning message out for the flash flood for the Toutle River. And I started updating all the Eastern Washington forecasts, the terminal forecast and the air route forecast. And back then in the terminal forecast, there was no code for volcanic ash. And I remember turning to Paul going, there's nothing for volcanic ash. What the heck should I use? Dust? We use dust. But in the transcribed weather broadcast called Tweet Broadcast, I just typed it out, volcanic ash. Also called the Air Route Traffic Control Center down in Auburn, said, Houston, we have a problem. The mountain is gone. They started shutting down the airspace and working with the other ARTCCs going further east where the plume was going to be going. And I think the rest of it is history. It took me about an hour to get everything done. And then after that, it was sit back and watch what was going on. Satellite imagery. We've all seen the satellite pictures that are associated with that, et cetera. So that was, the very first big career moment, if you wish, that I had in my weather service career.
Ted, I've got a question for you. That volcano or that eruption was largely ash, right? Was that largely ash?
Well, yes, it was ash. Okay. It didn't have lava or anything like that. However, the north side of the mountain slid into Spirit Lake. Okay. You remember Harry Truman, the old guy who wouldn't leave? Well, he got buried in that. And it was the debris that slid into Spirit Lake that splashed down into the Toutle River and resulted in the mud flow, the lahar that you saw on video clips. Moving downstream for that. But yes, it was basically an ash scenario. And it was just a week later, it erupted again. I happened to be playing a golf tournament down in the Salem, Oregon area. And at that time, we had an upper level low move in over the area. So the ash goes upward and then it circles around like going through in a toilet. And I remember out there on the golf course having ash falling down on the course itself. It's drizzling, so now it's sticky. And I can remember one putt, and it looked like you were collecting snow on the golf ball as it was rolling towards the cup. Wow. And playing in a match play tournament against my opponent, a very memorable kind of event, no doubt about that.
It is amazing that we were alive then. I was a high school senior, and I had just been to the International Science Fair and met a fellow from Sweden who was over with his project, and he was touring the United States, and he sent me a postcard from Washington after the volcano blew, and he was in hog heaven because he was a geologist, and he was just like, this is the greatest thing that could have ever happened on my United States trip. It was quite interesting to go there and see that site. I went on unfortunately, it was sort of a foggy, cloudy day. You really couldn't see the mountain as clearly as I would have liked to, but the lahar was what was so impressive to me. And that made it all the way to the ocean, didn't it, Ted?
Well, it made it into the Columbia River. It didn't get down to the ocean per se, but they did have to dredge the Columbia River to keep it open so that ocean-going vessels could get to the port of Portland. So it did have a lot of debris work its way down the Cowlitz and into the Columbia River. And the Corps of Engineers had to do a lot of dredging to deal with that. In fact, if you drive from Seattle to Portland, as you're approaching the Toutle River itself, and I just did this a couple weeks ago myself, there's a big mound on the west side of the freeway, just north of the river. That is where they took all the dredge material in that particular stretch of the river. They piled it up there. And it's like a hill that's maybe 100, 150 feet in height. And that hill is still there. Now, it's growing a lot of grass and other small trees and shrubs at this point because it's been that many years. But every time I drive by, I look over and I go, I remember when that was put together.
Yeah, that's just an amazing event. Now, you talked about the big blow, the Columbus Day storm. What's the biggest floods, the flood of record? In that area from
probably
your
the
time?
Biggest one would be December of 2007.
Mhm.
And you might remember when Interstate 5, again in the Centralia Chehalis area, went underwater, totally flooded. In fact, that was estimated to be, if not a 500-year flood, maybe a 1,000-year flood. They had some places in the Willapa Hills, which is between where I-5 goes between Seattle and Portland and the coast. And those hills are in the 2,000 to 4,000 foot range. There were some places in there that had over 30 inches of rain in 24 hours. It just came down in buckets. And it just completely overwhelmed the tributaries and the upper Chehalis River and came roaring downstream, essentially a flash flood. Jen, I think it was either you or Kim that was talking about flash flooding, with heavy rainfall coming up here in the near future. And that's what this particular event was. The river gauge at Doty, which is on the upper part of the Chehalis River basin, it got wiped out, but when it was in the process of rising, it soared past the record, kept going, and then that was it, because the gauge itself got erased by the flood. And a ton of debris in it. There were hundreds of landslides associated with this. I don't know how many head of cattle were killed, and all kinds of flooding in and around the Centralia Chehalis area and downstream into Grace Harbor, the Aberdeen and Hoquiam areas.
Well, I always think of the weather in the Pacific Northwest as being rather tranquil. But it seems like when you do it right, or you do it big, because you turned around in 2008 and had a big snowstorm in Seattle, didn't you?
Yeah, we had the Snowmageddon of December 2008.
They've got a Snowmageddon too, James.
Yeah, there you go.
Boy.
It snowed on and off starting, I think it was right around December 12th or 13th. During that stretch, now this is when we were just getting started doing webinars for the emergency management community, the media, all the partners and stakeholders that are involved in response and recovery from these kinds of events. During that time period, I did 17 webinars in just 3 weeks. So it's essentially one about every 2 days, give or take, of continually just briefing people. Here's what's going on and here's what's expected in the near future, so they could go out there and make all the planning and preparations that they need to do in advance of that. And Bill, right after that, in January of 2009, here came an atmospheric river. So you've got the snow levels soaring up past 7,000 feet. It's raining like gangbusters in the Olympics and the Cascades. And all the lower elevation snow that was, a foot, 2 feet deep melts and just contributed to another widespread flooding event. We had a period there from 2006 till probably about 2012 where we just had one big weather disaster after another. It was a very busy time period.
Yeah, and then turned around with a huge heat wave in 2021, right?
Yeah, late June 2021. I never seen anything like this before, where you get a big heat dome that parks. I was joking that the meter was running. It parked over us and just amplified the heat over the course of several days. Back in July of 1994, Seattle had its first 100-degree day. And at that time, the all-time records for the high and low temperatures was perfect. It was 100 and 0. 0 degrees was on January 31st, 1950, in one of the big 20th century Arctic outbreak events that lasted for about 5-6 weeks. Anyway, it was 100 and 0. And then in July 29th, 2009, it hit 103. It kind of ruined the symmetry that was going on. And then came June of 2021. We hit 100, 103, and 108 degrees in 3 consecutive days. And just incredible. I mean, Portland hit 116, 117 degrees. Never seen anything like that. Now, I'm a baseball umpire. And this was on a Saturday, a Sunday, and a Monday. And I remember the Saturday morning, they were desperate for umpires. So I signed up for a 9 a.m. game. So early in the day, as early as you could do. It happened to be on what's called a skin infield, so there's no grass, it's all dirt. And I remember asking the guys at the plate meeting, hey guys, can we do what they do in Arizona? Let's put a 2-hour time limit on this, because, it's going to be hot. And, all of us, the kids, myself, you, the fans, they're all going to need relief out here because there's no shade. We're out here in the middle of this field, and it's just going to get hotter and hotter as the game wears on. And they wouldn't agree to it. So wouldn't you know it, in the 5th inning, I'd already downed 2 large bottles of water. I'm by myself because we don't have enough umpires. That's another issue for another day. And meanwhile, the players, they were wilting like flowers. I mean, you could just see it. They couldn't throw, they couldn't hit, they couldn't catch. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And by kids here, I'm talking 15-year-olds. But by the 5th inning, I was starting to feel lightheaded and a little on the dizzy side. So in other words, heat exhaustion is starting to set in. And if the 5th inning was over, I called the coaches over and said, guys, take a look at my eyes. You tell me if we can go on. And they had seen me at the plate meeting, and now they saw me 2 hours later at this moment, and they basically said, we're done. Now, I was lucky. There was a physician in the stands. And I came off the field. She took me over into the shade, and she took care of me for the next 20 minutes or so. I'm drinking more fluids. Somebody brought raspberries over, etc. So I was able to slowly but surely recover and go home. But I contacted our assigner, and basically, speaking with the exception here and there, all the other games for that weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, they were all scrubbed because of the excessive heat.
That's just amazing. And I remember looking at those highs in Portland in just disbelief, and seeing what Seattle's doing. Jen, you had a question for Ted?
I sure do. Ted, it's nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you as well.
Your handle is Tornado Ted. Now, the Pacific Northwest is not a hotbed for tornadoes. So I'm curious where you came up with that one. Is there like a tornado that or just a tornado history buff, or where you came up with your tagline there? But also talk about some of the historic tornadoes that have occurred in the Pacific Northwest, because there have been a few.
There have been, and I did weather spotter training for a number of years. But first, let me go to the tornado, Ted. I didn't come up with it. It was my college buddies that came up with it. And it goes back to college, Oregon State University. As you can tell, I'm not afraid of a microphone. So when it comes to talking, I'm able to do that kind of thing. So the winded part is where that came in as well. So that's where the tornado comes in. Now, it's interesting, in my weather service days, I also, because I've lived and work in a marine environment here along the Pacific coast, we have to deal with tsunamis. So Tornado Ted is TT, and Tsunami Ted is also TT. So if I'm doing anything that is marine oriented, I use the Tsunami Ted handle as well. It's all in fun, because when you have fun, you tend to engage your audience a heck of a lot better, and they tend to learn more, etc. So does that answer your question there, Jen?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And some of the historic ones too, were there any tornadoes that you covered or that you covered in your career? And just talk about some of those. I know there was what was it, 2018-ish, Manzanita, Oregon had a tornado that came on, if I'm saying that right. And then I know there have been bigger ones. The Vancouver one comes to my mind.
Yeah. Now, I was in high school in the Portland area. So April 5th, 1972, and had a squall line come through early in the afternoon. I had just gone through the lunch period and was in study period at this moment, and witnessed a pretty strong wind event that went past the high school, ripping some tiles off the roof, etc. It wasn't the tornado itself, but it was a pretty strong, shear line, if for lack of a better term. And it wasn't long after that that they had the Vancouver tornado touchdown. It turned out to be an F3. It hit a grocery store, a bowling house, and a school. Nobody was killed, but several hundreds were injured. And later that same day in Davenport, Washington, which is a little west of Spokane, another F3 tornado touched down that particular day. So there you had two F3 tornadoes, which are the strongest ever in Washington's history, recorded history that we know of. We had one more that occurred just a few years later in December of all months, December of 1972. It started as a waterspout off of Des Moines, that's pretty close to SeaTac Airport, moved ashore through Federal Way, went into the Green River Valley, and also was labeled as an F3. So those are the three F3 tornadoes that have occurred in Washington state history. The state itself averages 2 or 3 tornadoes a year. That's true for Oregon as well. And we had one recently that was near Bremerton, Washington, here just a few years ago. And again, it occurred in the month of December. I always emphasize that our thunderstorm seasons, we have a peak in the spring and we have a peak in the fall, because those are our transition seasons from winter to summer and from summer to winter. When we get that flow of cooler air coming in from the Gulf of Alaska aloft, that creates the more unstable air mass, and hence we can have more instability, thunderstorms, and of course tornadoes are born from thunderstorms. So they're pretty rare. We don't get the 50,000 foot tall CBs in this neck of the woods, but I've seen them get up to 45,000 feet on Doppler radar and other, the old WS-57 radars back in the day.
So
Kim, you're going to say something.
Yeah, you briefly mentioned tsunamis. So I think this is something that, while you've been out there, the science has been maturing some about the history of the area and exactly how vulnerable you all are to that threat. And can you tell us just a little bit about, in your time working for that office, what has been your involvement in trying to think about tsunami risks and what you can do to educate people and prepare for that kind of a hazard? And what an interesting part of the Weather Service, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Several stories I can go from here, Kim. So thank you for starting me. And I've got to remember all of them here. But I was part of the outreach team working with the Washington State Department of Natural Resources and the USGS and Washington State Emergency Management. We would do tsunami community workshops, basically from the Olympic Peninsula out on the outer Washington coast. My role was to talk about how the tsunami warning system works, how you can become more aware of tsunami watches and tsunami warnings, so that you can be part of an effort to be better prepared. Their role was to talk about the different sources for tsunami, whether it's distant or the Cascadia subduction zone scenario, which is the worst case scenario for us. And how to do the public education side of things. What do you do in case of a tsunami watch or in case of a tsunami warning? Those kinds of things. Now, we just had this past week the Great Shakeout. I did a podcast. I did some articles on the Great Shakeout. Did some interviews on the Great Shakeout because I'm still pretty active in working with the community to help better prepare, even though I'm quote unquote retired. Some people ask me, are you really retired? Well, as I said earlier, Bill, I'm repurposed. But again, it's the effort to help get people more aware of the hazards and be ready to respond, because earthquakes, not like weather, we have some notice. With regards to earthquake, they just happen. They're no notice type events. Well, we had an earthquake a couple of Sundays ago near Port Townsend. The northeast corner of the Olympic Peninsula was a 4.3 earthquake. We just had one last night on the Kitsap Peninsula west of Seattle. It was a 3.1 or a 3.2. In other words, we're the second most prone area in the lower 48 for earthquakes. Alaska is up there too, but we're second to California. And we keep getting these subtle little reminders of the fact that we are an earthquake country, and that's what helps with the Great Shakeout. So, Bill, we were talking earlier about big events in one's career, and this is related to tsunami for you, Kim. Because of all the outreach work I had done, I got selected in 2006 to be part of a U.S. aid team to go to Thailand and help them build their own tsunami warning system in the wake of the Boxing Day earthquake in 2004 that resulted in over 250,000 people dying, primarily in the Indian Ocean Basin area. So that was quite an honor to be able to go and do that. But there's some fun stories on this. So Bill and James, you want a funny moment? Here we go. So my role with this small team was to go there and talk about the U.S. tsunami warning system and how it works. Not to tell them how they should do theirs, but to describe how the system works. So one of the slides in my presentation, which had to be produced more than a month in advance because they needed to go and translate it into Thai on their end. And so I'm looking at my slide deck up on the screen, up on stage, but it's in Thai. And I did this a month ago or so. I don't remember exactly what I was doing with each of the words that are in the slide deck. But the one slide I had involved what I call the warning system. It's a three-legged stool. This is related from Dennis Milletti. For those who know him, he came from the National Hazard Center. He's passed away, unfortunately, but in Colorado, many years ago, I saw him present this, and man, it just sunk in. It made so much sense. So the three-legged stool has three components. Number one is detection and warning. That's one leg of your three-legged stool. So whatever that warning message is, it could be for weather, it could be a hazardous material spill, whatever the case may be. Leg number two is dissemination of the warning message to your target audience. Like the porridge, you don't want it to be too hot, too cold. You want it to be just right to reach that target audience. And then the third leg of your three-legged stool of the warning system is response. And James, you know this one as well. This is where you work with the public to have them better understand what to do when they get the warning message. And this goes back to the Great Shakeout as well. So Thailand had just established a new warning center, not just for tsunami, but an all hazards thing. It was in Bangkok. It was being run by a guy by the name of Dr. Smith. His Thai name is about yay long with a lot of strong consonants. I don't even try to pronounce it because it's that long. And he's sitting on the other side of the stage where I'm giving my presentation. We're probably 3-4 steps up from the floor where there's about 65 high-level Thai government officials that I'm addressing at this particular point. And I show this slide, and I talk about the three components of the three-legged stool, and all of a sudden, Dr. Smith, who's 70 years of age, he was educated in the U.S. at Stanford University. He's a pretty smart guy. He jumps out of this overstuffed chair and yells at me, and he goes, "Stop." And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what diplomatic disaster have I just created? Oh my goodness, I'm sweating bullets. And he turns to the audience, tells them to take their headphones off because they were translating what I was saying in English into Thai. And then he starts in Thai. If you ever heard Thai, it's strong language, strong consonant. He's doing one of these finger pointing things. Once he gets done, he tells them to put their headphones back on. He turns to me and he says, "Can I have that slide? I've been trying to tell these people about this, and you did it in one slide." And I'm thinking, whew, I'm off the hook. "Yes, Dr. Smith, you can have this slide." And I remember coming off stage after I was done. The small group is in the back of the room. We're doing high fives, like we just scored big time on this. And as a follow-up to that, this was in May of 06. In August of 07, in Phuket, I saw an article in the Seattle Times where they had done their very first tsunami test in Phuket. And it involved outdoor siren systems. They had all the hotels, the restaurants, and the tourists involved. And it worked very well. People knew that they needed to do vertical evacuation into the hotels, etc., or move to higher ground. It went very well. And that was one of those, I done good type of feelings. So Anyway, a little bit more to add to your question there, Kim.
Yeah, well, when we visited the Oregon coast several years ago, the tsunami warning signs were rather ubiquitous, and it was a thing to think about. Staring out at some
Bill,
beautiful haystack rock.
Yeah, did you go to Cannon Beach?
Yes.
Yeah, Haystack Rock.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first Monday of every month, they test their outdoor siren systems. And do you know what sound they use when they test them, Bill?
I do not.
They use cows. Moo. That's what they
Really?
use. And the tourists love it. This is so funny. It's just delightful to experience. So yeah, now they have the usual, if it was a real event, they're not using cows at that point. But it's just fun to do that when you're in Cannon Beach, if you happen to be there at 12 noon on the first Monday of each month.
That's pretty cool. What are the little boats called there, Ted? The little fishing boats? They have a special name for them. It seems like they were pretty cool.
Oh yeah. I don't recall exactly there's different kinds. So, but the bottom line is, definitely a marine community, no doubt about that.
Beautiful,
and you saw all the
beautiful
tsunami, not only the evacuation signs, but the inundation areas. You are entering a tsunami hazard zone. Signs that point you to areas to whether it's by car or on foot. I'll tell you, if we ever have the Cascadia subduction zone event, it's going to mirror what happened in Japan in March 2011.
Ooh.
Kim's nodding her head. Yep. So that was violent shaking in Tokyo, hundreds of miles away for 5 minutes. It was that long. And so that, there's your vertical displacement of the ocean floor and resulting in the tsunami that went throughout the Pacific Ocean. We all saw the videos out of Japan with regards to the run up and inundation that occurred there. Just an interesting scenario there. And that's the kind of thing that would occur with a Cascadia subduction zone event. Kim, going back in the history, and there's the story about the orphan tsunami in Japan. But as a result of the January 26, 1700 Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, estimated to be a 9.0. If you talk to the tribal nations from Vancouver Island into California, they talk about the battle between the Thunderbird and the whale. That was the tsunami itself. It occurred in the evening, so it was dark. You couldn't see anything, but you could hear it. And a lot of loss of life, but a lot of lives were saved because people knew how to respond to that in the tribal nations because they had experienced this many, many generations before. And according to the geologists I talked to, the Cascadia is supposed to let go again somewhere in that 300 to 500 year window. And we're in that window right now. And so that's another reason why we practice the Great Shakeout and try to educate people. I'm really proud of some of the hotels and motels along the Washington coast. Bill, you probably experienced on the Oregon coast too, where those folks have been trained to help the tourists. If you're from Kansas or if you're from Oklahoma, sorry, Kim, but you're lucky to be able to pronounce tsunami, let alone know what it means and how to spell it. They don't know. So, and when you hear outdoor sirens, if you're from Oklahoma, you're thinking tornado. You're not thinking tsunami. So these are the important things that need to be shared, not only with the residents and the businesses, et cetera, but the folks that are visiting your area as well.
Precisely. That's a passion for Dr. Neil Jacobs too, because he's tried to get hotels in the areas where he is influential to put the information out there. But they tend not to want to do that, don't they, Dr. Neil?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit tricky because they're worried about scaring off business.
That was an issue when we had our first tsunami ready community in the nation, which is Ocean Shores in 2001. It was a big deal. But with regards to business, and Neil, you're welcome to learn this and share it on their end. They decided to embrace it. So there's a shop in Ocean Shores, Washington. It's on the central Washington coast. It's the It's the shark shop. If you can look it up online, it's got the big shark teeth, opening to walk through the front door. But in there, you will find Tsunami sweatshirts, Tsunami t-shirts, Tsunami hats, Tsunami beer mugs, coffee mugs, and my favorite is Tsunami underwear.
Show
yes.
title.
James needs
Show
some of
title.
that.
That's a show title.
May need an extra pair when something happens.
Yeah.
That's the point. And again, they embraced it, and they sell a lot of them. So there's your business incentive right there. There's the cookie, the carrot to serve in front of them is to take it and embrace it. It's exactly what to do.
I wonder. I bet we could do this with everything from like rip currents to storm surge.
Yes. Sell merchandise with it. And trust me, it flies off the shelves. I see people wandering around with it all the time. And so, Kim, from your perspective, if you see somebody who's wearing a Tsunami sweatshirt or a t-shirt, they probably got it on the central Washington coast. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Ted, question for you. So someone who, and I've been to Portland a couple of times, but I spend at least a fair amount of time out toward Claylock, out on the western Washington coast and up toward Forks and out there, but out toward La Pouche, and I think it's Rialto Beach that's out there kind of the west. They've actually relocated. They've done a lot of work relocating that community to higher elevations, right?
Yes, there you're talking about the Quileute tribe,
right?
And a lot of the tribal members, etc., have moved roughly a mile east, up on the hill. They have a new tribal center. It's not so new these days, but they've moved a lot of the residences there. Another one is the Quinault Nation, which is in Grace Harbor County. Same thing, moving it up the hill from Tahola. And in and around the new tribal center that's up on the hill. So in other words, they're in the process of moving people out of harm's way, not just for tsunami alone. We're also talking about rising sea levels and coastal flooding as a result too. So yes, they're using tsunami as a primary reason, but it's not the only reason to do that.
Well, let me ask you one question, because I've always in La Pouche, which is, you get down there, the one thing that scared me so much is when you get to the furthest point you can get on a road down there, you're in the middle of a school. The school at La Pouche was actually there on the beach, basically. I'm assuming they've moved that up the hill. I hope they have.
I haven't been there for a while, so to be quite frankly, I don't know if it has finished that. I know that it's in the works.
Okay.
Same thing's going on with the Quinault Nation. Same thing is going on with the Macaws out at Nia Bay, up on the north tip of the Olympic Peninsula. So yes, they're in the process of moving a lot of these low-lying areas up out of harm's way. And if you go to the Shoalwater tribe, which is in extreme southwest Grace Harbor County, they just recently finished and dedicated a new tsunami evacuation tower because there's nowhere for them to go that's higher ground. So the only place they can go is up. And in Westport, which is also in Grace Harbor County, was the first school to the Acosta School. It's an elementary school, and they built a platform that can hold just about 1,000 people. That is several stories up in case of tsunami from Cascadia primarily, that people can escape to. Not just for the kids, but also for any residents that can reach that area. Because if we have the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, much of the Washington coast sits on sand spits like Westport, Ocean Shores, Long Beach. You mentioned Rialto Beach, a lot of other low-lying areas. This is going to shake like jello, like pudding, and you're going to have subduction. And so that just invites the ocean to come in even further and have greater inundation. So the roads are going to break up like a cracker, like you walked on a cracker. So they're not going to be drivable. Anything on wheels is going to have a tough time. So a lot of your evacuation process is going to have to be on foot, and it's going to have to be vertical.
Well, I'm going to be at Claylock in one of those cabins, Ted, for after New Year. So if you can manage to do anything and keep that away during that time period, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I was going to say, Troy, one other thing while you're there at Claylock, they've had a lot of beach erosion,
Yeah.
and asked the proprietors there about where the shoreline used to be in relation to where the cabins are. And my understanding is they've actually started to move several of the cabins further away from the edge because the ocean has been eating away at that quote unquote cliff. It's not a big cliff, but it's a cliff that you've been there, so you know what I'm talking about. And I've done a couple of weather spotter training sessions in the dining room there at that facility. So yeah.
Well, one of my cabins that I do like at Claylock, I've been told is no longer available, and it is right there as you make the walk down the hill, down the cliff to the beach. And I always kind of wondered about that, if the Park Service would finally at least remove a couple of those from being able to be leased.
Yeah, I've seen some news reports where they're actually in the process of starting to move some of them. And those cabins have been there a long time, maybe close to a century at this point. So
such a beautiful place, Ted.
Oh,
really
it is absolutely gorgeous. And a
whole
lot of people.
Rainforest.
Yeah, well, the whole rainforest is up the road there.
Yeah.
Another place, if you go there, Troy, go a little bit further north, past Ruby Beach, goes inland. Go to the Ho Indian Reservation. It's the smallest. Okay, go all the way to the end of the road.
Yep.
All the way down to the beach. And if you want to see an absolutely pristine, private beach that just is untouched, it is so photogenic. Yeah. You will spend a half hour, an hour there just gandering at nature's beauty right there. It is absolutely fantastic.
Well, I want to thank you for your work and all the folks up there that have been out there and to help those people understand the threats, because just appreciate what you've done.
Yeah, well, it's all about serving the community. No doubt about that.
Yeah. So Ted, we always think of the Pacific Northwest as very wet, and that's a bit of a misnomer. Why don't you talk about that myth and kind of correct that misconception that a lot of folks have?
Well, one of the things I've done for now, I believe 16 years, is I work with the Como TV weather team, and they participate in the Seattle Mariners weather education event that they have each year. And it's during the morning ahead of a day game. This year it was held in April. It's usually in the month of May. And they bring in school kids from all over the place, etc. But we have a trivia segment in that particular program. And one of the questions that's in there is, which city is the driest with annual precipitation? And Seattle's listed, but they list New York, and they may have Miami, New Orleans, several, east of the Mississippi type of cities. And they'll have 4 or 5 choices, with Seattle being among one of them. And always the answer is the driest of them all is Seattle, because it only gets about 38, 39 inches of rain a year. Now, our number of cloudy days, that's another story. The number of days of rain, like this morning, I'm a member of the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. I measured 1/100th of an inch of rain and reported it this morning. Okay, you have a lot of these days where it's just a little bit of rain. We don't have the downpours. Who was it that said that we had was it you, Troy, that said we had 1.5 inches of rain in Austin? Yeah. Okay, that's pretty rare to happen. Yes, it can happen in an atmospheric river type scenario, but that doesn't happen all that often. It's the more 0.05, 1/10 of an inch, those kinds of rainy days, if you wish.
But Ted, tell me about that rainfall out there west of Mount Olympus, though, out toward the Ho rainforest.
Yeah. And creates the rain shadow.
Yeah.
So to give you a good example of that, you can get, it's just about 200 inches of rain a year on the west and southwest slopes of the Olympic Mountains. But if you go 25 miles to the northeast to Sequim along the Strait of Juan de Fuca, their annual precipitation is right around 20 inches of rain. Now that is the definition of a rain shadow. And then we have another unique feature around here. And I always use the analogy of the Olympic mountains being like a pile of rocks in the middle of a stream. And you have westerly flow coming in from the Pacific, and low level flow now, we're talking less than 8,000 feet. And the airflow coming in from the west. hits the Olympics, wraps around the pile of rocks just like it would in a stream, and it meets on the backside. Hence the term Puget Sound Convergence Zone. And I live in the north end of the Puget Sound area, so I'm more or less in the heart of the Convergence Zone birth area, if you wish. And we often joke that it's the Alderwood Mall that is the actual epicenter of the Puget Sound Convergence Zone, which is not far from where I live. But you can have a lot of rain in a very narrow band. Meanwhile, you go down to like downtown Seattle, the sun is out, it's gorgeous. You look to the north going, man, it looks pretty dark up there. Or you go north of the Confucius Zone, maybe up towards Navy Whidbey on Whidbey Island, or Mount Vernon. The sun is out, it's gorgeous. It's just this little narrow band of clouds and precipitation. And because the airflow through the Strait of Juan de Fuca tends to be stronger, it tends to drift south into King County and down in towards Seattle, etc. But if it's cold enough, I've seen it where it snows out of it. I've seen it with thunderstorms in it, whereas everybody else is having a nice day.
Do you get much spin setting up in that convergence zone?
Usually not. If you do, it's very, very brief. Yes, there's been some less than 1 minute type of touchdowns, if you wish. Very, very rare to do it. Because the shear is just not quite right to make that happen.
How important is the sea breeze in the forecast there, Ted?
It where I live, again, I'm a little bit closer to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, so we get a daily sea breeze that comes down. I'll get a nice northwest wind here. It'll be, say, 90 degrees in downtown Seattle, and I'll be 82 as a result of that sea breeze. So I call it nature's air conditioning. So it keeps us pretty temperate. And that's temperate on both sides of the coin. So in the winter season, we get flow in from the Pacific. Instead of being 30 degrees or 32 degrees, we're going to be 39, 40, 44 degrees. And in the summertime, it tends to keep us from having too many days in the 90s as a result of, or in comparison rather, with many other locations.
And I bet mountain waves are a pretty fun thing to see develop.
Oh, they are. You look on visible satellite imagery, and you can see that westerly flow and the flow bouncing up and over the Cascades, and then just ripples after that going across eastern Washington. So for the flights that are relatively low elevation, talking maybe Horizon Airlines out of SeaTac going to Spokane, they got to be aware of the bounce in the atmosphere. And of course, you get the cloud caps over Mount Rainier. I was just telling somebody, I think it was yesterday, about I did a story about the initial sci-fi flying saucer over Mount Rainier. It was reported by a pilot, I think it was the year 1947, and it kind of spun up the sci-fi era that we had in the late 40s and into the 1950s in Hollywood.
Yeah, even a senator claimed he'd seen a UFO or something. It probably was a mountain wave, wasn't it?
That may be the case, yes.
Now,
quite the
we
imagination.
talked about some of the big windstorms that were more, formed from a cyclone, but you have some downslope windstorms, don't you? Also there in Washington on the eastern side of the Cascades, is that right?
Yeah, it can happen. In fact, the worst case scenario for me is during the summer season when it's been hot and it's been dry. You get a fire start, and then you have the strong west wind. So the wildfires that we had in the Spokane area, probably less than a week after the unfortunate firestorm there in West Maui and Lahaina, were the result of fire starts during southwest winds that were in the 15 to gust 30 mile per hour range. And so, dry weather, heat, and a fire source, there's your fire weather scenario, your recipe, if you wish. Throw those strong winds in there and off they run. And it's happened there. Now, in the winter season, we can get what are called the Enumclaw wind events. So these are east wind events, kind of like a Santa Ana, except in the winter season. You get strong high pressure east of the Cascades, A storm is approaching the Pacific coast from the west, tightens up the pressure difference across western Washington, and particularly through the Cascade Mountain gaps. And that's where those strong winds will have more localized but pretty strong damaging winds, 50, 60 mile per hour gusts, knocking down trees, knocking power out in relatively smaller areas, but still significant for those that are adversely impacted.
We get a lot of requests for shows about Pacific Northwest weather, so I think we've had a great crash course tonight.
Well, I will say that coming up in next month, I am scheduled to do a Weather Hazards of the Pacific Northwest webinar for the Snohomish Island County Library System.
Wow.
For 1 hour. I've already got the PowerPoint drafted because it's stuff I've been talking about for years. But I'm going to talk about anything from winter storms, windstorms, atmospheric rivers, aka Pineapple Express, to heat waves, poor air quality, all the different kinds of hazards that we have in this neck of the woods. And Bill, if we drew a pie chart of the presidentially declared disasters, weather related in Washington state, about half of them would be flooding related. But the others, snow and ice and windstorms, are kind of tied for second and third. Landslides, you remember the Oso landslide we had 9 years ago that we had 43 lives lost with that. And then wildfires. So those are the top five in our neck of the woods. And that have been weather related. And of course, there's been a few others, Mount St. Helens being one of those that was volcano related.
Well, I think we covered the gamut pretty well. Now, we haven't talked much about your repurposing yet. Talk about some of the cool things you're doing since retirement.
Well, in your introduction, I've become an instructor with the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center. One of the most popular courses right now is climate adaptation for emergency managers. It's a FEMA course. I will be helping to deliver that course at the International Association of Emergency Managers Conference coming up early next month in Long Beach. But I was in North Dakota in September teaching that. I'm actually teaching it to some folks virtually in New York State and New Jersey tomorrow and Wednesday. There are seats available if anybody wants to jump in and take that by chance. I've worked with the media for so many years in my role as the warning coordination meteorologist, and I got picked up by the two Everett or Snohomish County radio stations doing traffic and weather together. I've got the podcast there. If you want to put the link in the chat box for everybody at everettpost.com. You can check out the podcast in there. My latest one has dealt with the latest seasonal weather outlook and what are going to be the impacts from El Nino here in this neck of the woods. I also do news stories there. And as a result of what I've been doing there, the folks at Cairo FM, which is the major CBS News affiliate in Seattle, has picked me up to also do some traffic and weather for them. I'm known as Cairo News radio meteorologist, Ted Buehner there. I did a story on our upcoming weather change. Several of you mentioned how much cooler we're going to be. Well, we're going to see our first mountain snowfall coming up tomorrow night into Wednesday of the season so far. A big change after being just 70 degrees just a few days ago. We're going to be struggling to reach 50 degrees here later this week for high temperatures in the lowlands and snow levels dropping below all the Cascade passes by Wednesday morning. So that's fun. In a couple of weeks, actually it's November 1st, I'm going to be working in the Snohomish County Elections Office. I'll be one of those helping to process ballots. So there's a lot of other things I do too. I mentioned the baseball umpiring already, but I'm the chair of the Washington State Emergency Communications Committee. That's a volunteer effort. In my role as a WCM, I was part of the process of taking emergency broadcast system and evolving into the emergency alert system. And that we manage not only EAS, but also wireless emergency alerts. We had the national test early this month, and with the great shakeout, we also had another test using EAS to initiate the earthquake drills across the state, as well as the school's tsunami evacuation drills here this past Thursday. I'm also the chair of the Partners in Emergency Preparedness Conference, a group I have been with since the late 1990s. And we're working on putting together our 2024 conference. It's going to be held at the Tacoma Marriott. The FEMA administrator has agreed to give a video presentation for that. I just invited the FEMA Region 10 director earlier today to come and introduce her. I just invited Governor Inslee to attend and be a keynote. We have somebody coming from Hawaii talk about the Maui firestorm and all the communication issues. I mentioned the three-legged stool. That's an element in that particular presentation. So the call for presentations is open right now. So Bill, if you want to put that link in the chat box for everybody, it's piepc.org. That stands for Partners in Emergency Preparedness Conference. You mentioned I work with Snohomish County Emergency Management and also Amateur Radio, their ACS group. Volunteer with the Red Cross, primarily in my amateur radio role. I mentioned the Mariners Weather Education Day. And there's so many other things I'm doing, but you can tell I'm repurposed. To me, the passion is continuing to serve our community. Why? It would be selfish if I walked away from my weather service career of more than 40 years and did not continue to share my knowledge and my experience with others to help save lives and property.
That is so exciting. Yeah, drop me a note with all those things. We'll have JP put it in the show notes. Ted, make sure we get all that covered. So one of my favorite rail cams on the virtual rail fan is Skycomish in Washington. How much snow will they get up around there in the next several days, Ted?
Probably in the vicinity of 6 to 12 inches. That would be my guess.
That's a beautiful, beautiful place, and
and
with a lot of railroad history too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, on Stevens Pass, this would have been in 1903, if my memory serves me right. The deadliest avalanche in American history occurred there, where two trains coming from Spokane to the west side were stopped just west of the Spokane Pass tunnel, or portal as they called it back then, waiting for the snow to be cleared off the tracks ahead of them. And a thunderstorm triggered a massive half-mile wide avalanche that came rumbling down the hill and took both trains and threw them down into the ravine below them, killing close to 90 people or so. So yeah, you mentioned that a lot of snow can occur up there. In fact, I think it was the winter of 1998-99 where Mount Baker had a record 1,140 inches of snow during that winter season. They had to plow the snow runs to be able to use the chairs so they could get the people up to the top of the runs so they could ski down. So very interesting to do that.
Wow. And so what's your ham radio call sign, Ted?
It is W6 Tango Oscar Romeo, or TOR. There is your tornado theme again. W6 Tango Oscar Romeo.
There you go. Well, anything else from the panel? We've had a great time with Ted tonight. Anything else the panel wants to add? And then we'll let James ask the hard questions. We keep him for the end, Ted.
I got a quick one.
Go, Dr. Neal.
No one's taking my bait in the chat for my ham question, so I'm just going to throw it out there. So this goes for all the ham folks here. I do a lot of stuff like backcountry, backwoods, and I was looking for some handheld radios that had higher wattage to transmit a little bit further. And I came across this radio called a UV5R. And this thing has generated more angst on the internet than I think any electronic device on Earth, because it'll let you get on any frequency. It'll operate at significantly higher wattages. And apparently people without license can transmit on GMRS and everywhere else. And it's got, apparently there's like this UV5R users versus ham radio operators
Mm.
in some sort of online battle of whether or not this thing is actually properly, I guess, registered to use in these frequencies. Is anyone tracking this stuff? I mean, I decided to go get my technician's license just because I was afraid to touch this thing.
I'm interested in it because I'll turn around and share it with the folks at Snohomish County Emergency Management ACS group. There's 150 of them there, and these are retired smart people. Microsoft, Boeing. I mean, we're talking really. These folks blow me out of the water. They're up here, you know. But if you've got some info on that you can share with me, I will turn around and share it with them, and maybe we can get to the quote unquote bottom of this, if you wish.
Oh, the internet goes pretty deep.
I know.
I'm afraid to find the bottom.
But these guys are good. They like challenges, so this might be right in their wheelhouse.
Looks
I'm looking.
Looks like it's made by one company though, Neil, right? That's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, Baofeng or something.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of stuff on it. I'm a ham radio operator. I did not know about it either. So
that's Chinese.
It looks like it sells
exactly.
for $18 on Amazon. Is that right?
This
$29.99, the one I'm looking at.
I'm telling you, this thing is a rabbit hole worth exploring.
Yeah.
So it has a disclaimer on
fascinating.
this site that says you can buy it and you can monitor, but you can't transmit without a license.
No, and I was going to say, and the FCC will be on your door the next day. So
yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You're not supposed to, but there's no capability in the phone preventing you from doing it, or in the handheld.
Yeah,
right. It looks like any jabroni can buy this thing for $18 and just get on there and get on the repeater of their choice. You know, they get on 2 meters on 440 or whatever and just yak away with no license, which is
well, this
really
sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But I know I see handheld scanners for train fans, and some of them are transceivers, $29. You know, where I imagine you could transmit on the frequencies of the railroad, which would be terrible and very, very illegal. Wow.
Hey, Ted, when did you get your ham license?
Oh, it was during my weather service days. I renewed once, so I'm going to say at least 15 years ago.
Okay. I got this is embarrassing. I got my license in 1970, wow. When I was 14 years old.
Okay, 14.
14.
Former chair of the Washington State Emergency Communications Committee, Clay Freimwald, if anybody happens to know him, he got his first license in 1951.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, it's what got me into this, and again, it's a great hobby. But I got a few quick questions here. So let's shift gears now. This baseball ump thing. I mean, you listed a long list of activities that you're involved in here, but the baseball ump thing is a little fascinating. So, how many managers have you thrown out of a game?
My very first one was at age 16. I played football with his twin sons. And my first season, this was 16 years of age. So I played in Babe Ruth from 13 to 15. I got recruited to help umpire because they were short on umpires. Sound familiar? At age 16, I worked the minors of the next level of Babe Ruth. And then halfway through the season, they brought me up to the majors where I had just played the previous season. And where I'm going with this is the guys I played football with, their dad used to play football. So he was a big guy. He was a linebacker. His name was Mr. Rose. And I remember a game at Lake Ridge High School in the Portland area. I'm working the dish. There's a line drive down the left field line. I called it foul. He's in the third base box, and it was his turn to challenge me. And he comes blowing down the line, and he gets in my face. I mean, I'm getting spit on me, you know, the routine that you can envision, almost a Lou Piniella move. But I got him turned around, so I'm facing center field. He's facing the crowd, and he bumped me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see you toss the gal. Let me see your hand.
Oh, I can't do it all here because I go off screen. Okay.
Okay.
It was just a simple boom. I didn't have to say anything because the motion alone said it all. And now it was like a new volcano had just erupted again. He just exploded. And at this point I said, you have 30 seconds to get off this field or this game is over. His fans behind me are screaming at him to get him off the field. He finally reluctantly gets off the field. Where I'm going with this, and his team ended up winning anyway. But in the parking lot, as I'm taking the gear off, etc., I had one parent after another come up and say, thank you for doing that. Nobody's had the guts to do this. Because he's such an intimidator. He's a big guy, 6'4" and 250 and just built like a house. He's a big dude. And I'm only 5'10", so he's towering over me. But anyway, at that point I said, geez, I must be doing okay in this. And it just kind of took off after that. So I've been doing this. Was my 46th season this year. And I do mainly high school ball. At one time when I was in Portland in the 90s, I worked Pac-10 ball. It wasn't Pac-12 back then. I don't know what they're going to call it in the future here. That's another story. But I worked 2 years of Pac-10 ball. So I've done a lot of collegiate ball, high school ball, men's leagues, youth leagues. I'm talking from 13 up through high school age for many, many years.
Wow, that's outstanding. So we have to take a break. Before we do that, though, really quickly, your thoughts on the future of the National Weather Service. With Ken Graham at the helm now, where do you see the Weather Service going in terms of, folks that want to get into it, young people want to get into it, work for the Weather Service? Are the jobs going away? Is it going to be AI, machine learning? Where do we go from here?
Well, those are all good questions and issues that I think are going to be answered in the years to come. But quite frankly, if you look at the American public and the need from particularly the emergency management community, but it could be the public sector, the private sector, utilities, educators, the health community, I mean, just the whole range of partners and stakeholders that are involved in weather in one way or another, they're going to still need that professional meteorologist who can provide that information and decision support information so that people can make educated and knowledgeable decisions on what steps they need to do to help protect lives and property. I think that function is going to continue regardless. It's a question of how it's going to evolve, whether it comes to how much funding comes from Congress, and what kind of technology evolution continues. As you recall, it was the modernization in the 1990s that resulted in 1 in 6 jobs being declined. AI, that egg is just starting to get cracked open. That's a really good question on how things are going to evolve. But if I were in high school age or maybe early in my college career, I'd still be getting that education and trying to move into, whether it's with the Weather Service or if it's another governmental job, whether it's in the media, whether it's at the military or maybe academia, any of those kinds of angles and fields that you can get into from meteorology, I think they're still going to be very, very valuable and in demand going forward.
And let me ask Dr. Jacobs, Neil, let's say we have a 17-year-old high school senior listening to this. They want to do weather, work for the Weather Service. What do you say to them?
Stay in math, stay in science as much as you can, take as much programming. It doesn't even matter what language it is. Just, it's really, it's everything's going to be run by programs. So if you want employment in the future, you want to be writing those programs.
So and again, that's the question I hear all the time. What about your minor, after meteorology? So you'd suggest programming?
I mean, if you have a lot of choices, I mean, other ones that I think are really good are just economics, and knowing that it always baffles me how, do something. If you have a choice to do like a minor or a second major, do something really different. So you're not like, some people are like super, super smart, but it's in like one real niche area. having some, because I think a lot of times those jobs where these different expertises intersect is really beneficial. I mean, Kim could tell you that. She's like social science and economist.
Well, if I can add to that, think about all the jobs that will be involved in green energy, solar energy, wind energy, and all those other things that where we are headed in the next generation or two.
Yeah, the times are changing. And by the way, before we take a break, I had to show you guys. So I was at a school today and I got a bunch of WeatherBrains cookies, which is like slightly awesome. I mean this is like way too good. So to my
your
friends
call
at
sign on there, James.
Yeah, my Whiskey Oscar 4 whiskey. I got my call sign, got the WeatherBrains logo. So again, to my buddies at Westminster School, thanks a lot. That was a great visit earlier today.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's good.
What's that other number? What's the significance of it? And
73s. I mean, it's the ham radio greeting.
The ham. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, there you go.
735. So yeah, 73.
Yeah.
And James, how many calories are in that cookie?
More than 73.
I found out when the show is over. In fact, I got a bunch of them here. We'll probably mail these things out to you guys.
Yeah, mail us all a cookie, James.
Anyway, let us pause, and we are going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear from Tony Rice, his astronomy report. We've got Jen, and this week in tornado history, we'll come back and do a weather roundup. We got a hurricane in progress out in the Atlantic, and we'll do picks of the week and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains. Hey.
Sorry.
All right, that was awesome. Anyway, we're going to come right back after Tony.
I thought we had some new music.
I thought I'd not pressed a button here and my music's playing. We'll be right back. Hang tight.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
You ever notice the terminator on the moon? That's the line that is separating the lit from unlit sides, and it's really prominent around first and last quarter, when that half disk of the moon is lit and the line is pretty much straight. Now imagine a perpendicular line extending out from that terminator. That should take you to the sun, right? That's where the light is coming from, and light travels in a straight line after all. But it doesn't appear that way. What you're seeing is the lunar terminator illusion at work. There's no trick of physics going on here. The light is still going in a straight line. If you follow the moon down to the sun, it appears curved because of visual clues, or the lack thereof. And the fact that we're viewing all of this from down below on the dome of the sky, which astronomers call the celestial sphere. A good time to see this in action is early this week when the moon and sun are in the sky, around sunset. The terminator appears to be pointing a little bit above the setting sun. This is because the only context we have for a straight line is the horizon. Unless you're out at sea, that line isn't all that straight anyway. Our brains want to draw that line between the moon and Earth along the celestial sphere in a way that's actually longer than a straight line, because the shortest line would appear curved at first glance. This phenomenon is also present in aviation. Think for a moment about a flight between New York and Madrid. Both these cities are around 40 degrees in north latitude, so the shortest path would be along that 40th parallel, right? That's actually a little bit longer than the geodesic or great circle route the planes actually fly. Why? Because planes and planets are all moving in three-dimensional space. And all those map projections, they're terrible in their own way of representing that three-dimensional space. Elsewhere in the sky, there was a solar eclipse last week. So that means that there's a lunar eclipse coming up next. This one is a partial lunar eclipse coming on Saturday, October 28th, and it's only going to be visible in the northeastern states. Already in progress at moonrise, which will be around sunset. This isn't going to be a particularly spectacular one, with only the lower left portion of the moon grazing the Earth's umbral shadow. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, October 23rd, 1934. An estimated F2 tornado moved to the northeast from 4 miles southwest of Maryville, Missouri. It moved right through town and hit a Depression area civilian conservation corps camp northeast of town. It ended 6 miles west of Parnell. I'm always fascinated by the newspaper accounts of tornadoes, especially from some of these older events. The Maryville Daily Forum described the event like this. In the stillness of the evening, as preparations were being made for the evening meal, the copper-colored clouds struck with a viciousness that left only debris and writhing forms. The damage truly was significant. 60 homes were unroofed or damaged in Maryville. The newspaper denoted that the worst damage in the downtown area was done at the McFarland Ice and Fuel Plant. The building lost its roof and it was carried west across the street and landed on top of the Martin building. Heavy concrete blocks were piled to the inside of the building. The damage at the Civilian Conservation Corps camp was tremendous. The barracks was destroyed, and tragically, 5 were killed. Here are their names: Harvey Drake, Guy R. Allen, H.S. Newton, Ralphie Hare, and Samuel F. Morrow. They were all veterans from World War I. To honor their memory, I have included the names of these heroes in our article about this event at tornadotalk.com.
But just maybe, we have a little email to read this week.
All righty, we have a couple of emails to read. First of all, this comes from Herschel, who is in eastern Middle Tennessee. He said he asked a retired meteorologist this question, and he says, we don't have the math yet. So I'm going to throw this mainly at Neil to see what he thinks. But considering weather models use math equations from a given state of the atmosphere, since the atmosphere is changing all the time, will there ever be math in the future that will take a given state and, due to the atmospheric pressures and everything else, be able to put out perfect data that could go as far as 2 to 3 months with hurricanes and severe weather setups?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So I don't, the math isn't the problem. The equations, we know these are the laws of physics. The problem and the limitation is you're starting with an initial value problem. And unless you can perfectly analyze the current state of the atmosphere, you'll never be able to perfectly predict what it's going to do in the future. And I think that that's probably the biggest limitation. If you could perfectly observe the atmosphere in its current state, you could predict the future way beyond several months. But you're talking about, observing the atmosphere on something like what a radio sun could do if you launched a radio sun every 30 seconds, every 10 square feet. Your observing systems would alter the state of the atmosphere at that capability. So, yeah, I mean, we're getting there. I would recommend, if you have a chance, go check out this paper by Lorentz. It's called The Limits of Predictability. I think it was late 50s or something like that. But it's ironic that he correctly predicted where the limits would be, and we're still struggling to beat those now.
Great. Thank you, Neil. All right. Our friend James Lewis has come through with 2 questions. So we'll start with the first one here about droughts. With the ongoing drought hitting almost all the regular panel, I thought now would be a good time to ask some drought-related questions. Can drought have a significant effect on the local weather in areas in drought conditions? And can it have any effect on larger scale weather? Would drought conditions have any meaningful effect on something like a hurricane moving into the area? Any thoughts on drought?
Well, it certainly has changed our weather here just this weekend.
Yeah.
We're in a little flash drought, and our temperatures were running 4 or 5 degrees hotter than what we expected over the weekend. I think a lot of that may have had to do with our recent dryness. Seems to me like hurricanes tend to be drought busters when they come into South Texas Hill Country, that area around Troy there.
Mm-hmm.
Glad y'all are finally getting some rain.
Yeah, thing that we sort of notice here, being real close, when you look at Kevin's climate classification, we're sitting basically half of Texas operates in a moisture surplus, the eastern half of the state, and the western part operates at a moisture deficit. And it almost seems like around here that drought begets drought. That sounds strange, but it really is true that, I mean, that line will expand further eastward. And the bad thing about that, especially with the geography around South Central Texas, is once you dry it out and you bring a hurricane in, everything chances are is going to initially be run off anyway. And you've got the hill country, that creates a bad situation. But like you say, Bill, in a lot of cases, droughts, we always had that joke here in Austin, droughts end with a flood in Central Texas. That's pretty much what we accept here.
Ted, do you want to talk a little bit about what you put in the chat there? I'd be curious about the Washington State drought.
Yeah, the Seattle Public Utilities currently is asking all their Seattle area residents to conserve water because they only have about 30% of what they really want in play at this time of year. We've had some rain recently, but it really has only made a small dent in the current water shortage situation. Earlier this year, we had another very dry, very warm summer. And there were parts of Whatcom County near the Canadian border that their wells ran dry. It's hard to imagine Washington State having these kinds of dry conditions. So if you look at the latest drought chart, you'll see that much of Washington State is either in moderate or extreme drought at this point, despite the recent rains. And now we've got El Nino in play for this coming winter season. And that tends to have the storm track spend a lot more time across the southern tier of the U.S., leaving the Pacific Northwest on average warmer than average throughout the entire winter season. And precipitation wise, we tend to be on the edge of it and not getting, more direct hits. So it's probably going to end up with at or below average precipitation. So we're not going to make up that ground with regards to the drought situation. And one more item on that, excuse me, with warmer than average conditions, your mountain snow low is going to tend to be higher than average, which means your snowfall is going to be only in the higher elevations for your mountain snowpack heading into next summer and fall. And quite likely, we're going to have less than an average mountain snowpack, which is just going to aggravate the water supply situation, as well as all the other issues. So wildfires, agriculture, fish, anything that involves water supply heading well into 2024.
Hey, thank you so much. The last question that Cece and I have here is about, this is from our friend James again. A question here for the TV people. There's sometimes talk of TV weather people going rogue and issuing their own warnings and torcons and things like that. There's also talk of the media and on social media of adding Category 6 to the hurricane scale. Have any TV weather stations gone rogue and started adding Category 6 to the scale or made up their own weird scale yet?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah,
All
no
the
TV
TikTokers and the YouTubers do that, but I think most television meteorologists have kind of shied away from that. In the some of the stuff like the winter storm names, that's rogue that the Weather Channel does, and but no, I to my knowledge, no, none of that's happening in broadcast meteorology.
Now you've seen a little bit, James, where some TV meteorologists have started issuing, or in some cases had been issuing their own warnings. And I don't think there's enough money and lawyers in the world to protect you if you do that. And it also creates a lot of enemies in emergency management. And it also violates basically the guidelines by the AMS that they have, that the National Weather Service should be the sole agency responsible for warnings, watches, and advisories.
Right.
And I think to that's by law in Congress, by the way. Really? So, and anybody who issues their own, you've got a big liability issue ahead of you.
I when I was in television, I always said, you want to go ahead and do that, but I'm not sure there's a lawyer in this country that'll be able to protect you from that. So.
And, there's a time where you might want to go in the air and say, there's no formal warning here, but there's a storm that you might want to watch. That's fine if you do something like that. We've all done things like that. But I just don't know of any, and that might have been the case 10 or 20 years ago, but I think most of that malarkey has stopped, thanks in part to AMS. I mean, if you want to keep your your CBM, you can't do that. But anyway, I don't think that's a problem, Jen.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And thank you so much, everybody, for your email at weatherbrains.com to give us your questions and comments, show suggestions and what have you. And please don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. If you go on weatherbrains.com, you're going to see our cute faces right there. There's a link that sign up for our newsletter every Thursday morning with some great articles and history and show recaps and all that fun stuff. Back to you, James.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So we're doing the show here on October 23rd. And Neil Jacobs, I just want to go to you on this hurricane. We have Hurricane Tammy as we do this, which is north of the Leeward Islands, well north of Puerto Rico. Have you looked at the modeling on this thing by chance in the last day or two?
I have. It's pretty crazy. Like it.
What's the deal here?
I think the models are kind of split into two camps. I mean, it's really, once a storm starts to head northeast and get above a certain latitude, it takes a strong ridge to kind of push it back, because Coriolis wants to pull it that direction. And I think there's some camps that think the ridge will build and push it back, and then there's others that just eject it, continue to northeast. But it's I'd be surprised if I think it's going to do some kind of like recurve back west, but I would be surprised if it gets pushed all the way down towards Florida like some of the ensemble members are showing. But I don't know. I mean, things get kind of weird towards the end of the season because the mid-latitude, the ridge trough axes start to get pretty amplified, just because you're getting into like the low pressure high frontal nor'easters, and those do wacky things with tropical storm tracks in late October, November. So don't take your eyes off the forecast. That's for sure.
It just seems like literally with the European and the GFS, half the ensemble, it's a split. Half the ensemble members go left, half go right.
What's funny is when I was teaching this in a class a while ago, because I said, this is what happens when you take the ensemble mean. If you have a split with the two camps, it almost always happens that one camp is right and one camp is wrong. But if you average them all, you're 100% wrong, because you're straight down the middle and nothing agrees with you.
Yeah, it's an entry. And the other thing, is it a tropical storm in 5 days, or is it a subtropical storm, or what is it in 5 days, or does it fizzle out completely? So,
yeah, they're going to have an extended period of tropical storm force winds in Bermuda if the forecast verifies.
Right. And the Hurricane Center clearly states this could be dead wrong, that they could make major adjustments to this thing. But anyway, that is the ongoing hurricane. There's another little wave that's in the far southwest Caribbean, and that's going to jump Central America and go back on the other side. And we've got Otis, my man, coming up on Mexico from the Eastern Pacific. But I think the other story.
And we got 21 that formed this afternoon.
Yeah, TD21. That's the one that'll jump through Central America and go over into Mexico. That's not a Gulf system. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, it's this cold air coming down the pike for next week. It looks cold. I guess, Kim, you're going to be in the middle of that next week, aren't you?
We sure will be. I for one, am pretty excited to get the seasons changing here. We've had flirtations with fall, and then it gets back up to about 90 degrees, and I'm just sort of done with it. So I look at that as a refreshing reset. But yeah, before we get to that, we'll just keep this stream of Gulf moisture coming at us for a couple of days, overtopped by mid-level disturbance that'll just rain itself out over us all week. So we'll go through that and then come out on the other side pretty cool when all is said and done. So this looks like it's the season change that we've been waiting for.
Hey, I've been interested to read all week the weather history around the Donora, Pennsylvania fog event that happened in the same week back in 1948. It was a really important watershed moment in environmental protection, because 20 fatalities and lots of people sickened when a big high pressure system set up a temperature inversion over the Monongahela Valley in Pennsylvania. And it was a fascinating time. I found an author who wrote a book this year I hadn't seen about the event, and going to have him invite him on the show here in a few weeks to come back and talk about that, because it's a pretty fascinating story.
Okay, and one other note while we're talking about weather is the NOAA winter outlook was released last week. Neil, did you see that? And your thoughts on that?
No, I didn't. I'm gonna have to go look this up. I'm still kind of focusing on the tropical and anything that's gonna improve the swell conditions, but I'm not tracking that.
Yeah,
Well,
just
James,
Troy.
that's the topic of the article I had posted on mynorthwest.com that got posted this morning is on that topic.
Well, what are your thoughts then, Ted? Go.
Well, I think it has a classic El Nino look to it as we go through November into February. It shows basically the storm track across the southern tier of the U.S. Much of the northern tier of the U.S. is warmer than average for the entire winter season, and you tip the odds on wetter than average from California all the way across the southern tier of the U.S. into the southeast. So for those that are dry in those areas, and I know California had a dozen atmospheric rivers last winter, but this is going to continue to help replenish their water situation there. I just hope they get enough snow in the Colorado Rockies so that we can get more water into the Colorado River system in that area. And, parts of the Southeast, man, it has been a wet summer season. So I know it's this dry time of year right now, but it looks like it's going to be wetter there. And, Jen, you can probably relate to this, that jet stream spending more time down there, that increases the odds on some tornado events, basically from eastern Texas all the way through Florida and into the Carolinas as we go through the winter season. And one of my concerns looking at it back in the history is that some of these are nocturnal tornado events where people are asleep in the middle of the night, and that's where your no-weather radio comes in real handy. One of these things to wake you up at 1 o'clock in the morning while you're sleeping to let you know, knock at the door, you're going to have a tornado plowing through your neighborhood or somewhere nearby.
Yep, always interesting this time of the year with the El Nino thing going on here. So let's see. I tell you what. Let's kind of shift into picks of the week here. Checking the clock, we've got to kind of shift over into that. This is where we're going to go around the horn. Everybody's going to share something weather related. This can be a website, data source, hardware, software, whatever. So let's begin with Dr. Neil Jacobs. Dr. Neil, what you got for us this week?
So I was trying to figure out what I was going to, because I'm on the hook this week to write the article. So it's on the way, Jen. I was, as the days get shorter, my time to fish in the morning gets compressed with the flood tides for redfish down in South Carolina. And I started trying to look at how early can I go out before, and get in place maybe 2 or 3 hours before the tide maxes out. And so I started looking at the difference between like astronomical and civil and Mariner's twilight. And I got the most useless answer I think I've ever seen, which is it has to do with degrees below the horizon.
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I going to do with that? Like, I want to know how light is it going to be outside and how I can actually, do I need a lamp? What do I need? Like, from a functional purpose, something telling me that the sun's 8 degrees below the horizon tells me nothing. And so I found this website that actually has like the degrees of horizon versus like what ambient light looks like, assuming there's no cloud cover. And so that's my pick of the week. It actually shows you what it looks like based on degrees below the horizon.
Okay, very cool. And again, all these picks will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Jen, let's kick it up to you. What you got for us?
All right. So this article came in today from our friend Jay Farlos, and it was very timely because this article talks about something that I'll be talking about in a couple of weeks in Richmond, Virginia, alongside Rick, as we recap a 10-year kind of a retrospective of the Moore and El Reno tornadoes. And this article talks about Danny Legg, a mom who's been on a mission for 10 years to get storm shelters in schools after her son Christopher was killed at Plaza Towers. And Christopher was a hero. He laid on top of one of his friends. Her name was Megan, and she survived, but he was killed. And this article is very good. It originally was from the Oklahoman, and it really just recaps this mom's passion to try to get shelters in every school and the amount of red tape she's had to go through, the battles. She started her own nonprofit to help to cover this, and she's been very successful in doing so, and she's not quitting. And I just wanted to read this last paragraph, a quote from her. She goes, "I can't give up. As soon as I do, something tragic may happen, and that's not acceptable. I will be happy when every school in this state has storm shelters. I have to keep going. I don't know what will happen to me if I slow down." So she's turned her grief into this passion to help others, and that's become her lifelong mission in honor of her son. So I wanted to share this article, and thank you, Jay, for sending that in.
Excellent. Again, these pics will be up on weatherbrains.com. And we should mention James Adelot he's a lot of us work during the show, and sometimes we have so much work to do that we just cannot make the show. So James is swamped with some work and stuff he's got to do. So he'll be back on the show next week. My pick, it's a TikTok video, and it's not dancing, it's not cussing, and it's not funny, or maybe it's not too funny. But we talked about this in the pre-show. I've been dealing with chemtrail people this weekend, and it's been pretty brutal. Really, really, really brutal. I mean, Troy, it's your fault. I'm blaming you because the cirrus clouds,
he sent it from Texas,
came from Texas. All right. So it actually originated with Tropical Storm Norma, which was in the Gulf of California. And the cirrus shield came through Mexico and Texas, and then Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and wound up here. And so we had the most amazing sky optics, just incredible, for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. Halos, arcs, sundogs, you name it, we had it. And the chemtrail people, they were absolutely on the warpath. I mean, it was bad. So on occasion, I have to get on the of course, a lot of what they're seeing originates on TikTok, is that the government's spraying our skies, they're controlling our minds, they're controlling the weather. You get diarrhea and hemorrhoids and, whatever from this stuff. And so anyway, I did a little TikTok video today to address that situation. So there. All right, Kim, give us a good pick of the week, please.
Man, how to follow up from the chemtrail people. So Dennis Milletti was mentioned. Thank you, Ted, for mentioning him. He was just foundational in so many aspects of risk communication as a field. And, one of the things you pointed to is this great framework he came up with that can be so useful to practitioners. That's something he did so remarkably well, was take the research from the social sciences on how people understand and can be communicated with about hazard risks, and then brings it to something really digestible for policymakers, for emergency response personnel. So in honor of that, I'm going to point to a resource from one of the last places that he was working before he passed. He was at a Department of Homeland Security Center of Excellence at the University of Maryland. And there's a great web resource with just a bunch of his, some later works, but also reviews. And if you're just interested in the thoughts of this really great person, a bunch of really approachable little things for you guys to dive into.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Kim. All right, Troy, go.
Foghorn. Wrapping the week. Sorry.
Yes.
I will go with Ted's and Kim's ideas though on El Nino and maybe bringing us rain here. I'll go for that. And I want the seasonal change too, Kim. So.
There you go. All right. So Ted, we've stalled long enough, so we know you got something good for us. So go.
Absolutely. First, Kim, your specialty is fill in the blank.
Yes, I work in the social sciences and meteorology, unsurprisingly.
Okay, I had a feeling that was the case. Do you know Dr. Jeanette Sutton of SUNY?
Very well.
Okay, she is going to be our Partners in Emergency Preparedness monthly webinar coming up on Tuesday, November 28th. But I would like to invite you to also be a participant in our 2024 Partners in Emergency Preparedness Conference. In the chat box there, you'll see a link for the call for presentations, because social science is a really key element in that three-legged stool, the warning system, because the response part of it from the public is so very important. Otherwise, the warning system fails. That leg falls apart, the whole thing. You can put out the best warning in the world, you can disseminate it to the whole world, but if they don't understand it and don't respond to it, we got a problem. And that takes me to my link of the week, if you wish. I'll put it in the chat box. But this is something I've been passionate about for so many years. And again, it goes back to the warning system, the three-legged stool. And it is this simple little tool, NOAA Weather Radio. It is a totally underutilized warning element, a way to receive warning messages 24 hours a day. It's all hazards. It's programmable. You can program it for your location, for whatever warning messages you want to receive. There's so much flexibility in them, and it is totally underutilized across the nation, and it is clearly a lifesaver for a pair of shoes. So I want to encourage everybody that is watching and listening to go out there and sell that concept. It's very easy to do. The one I just showed you is maybe $30. It's not a very expensive resource, but it behaves like a smoke detector, but does so far much more than that. And as chair of the Washington State Emergency Communications Committee, it is one of the key elements, especially during the wee hours when people are sleeping. I talked about the potential for tornado outbreaks in the southeast as we go through this winter season, and they tend to be nocturnal. So here again is another element. You can have an MCS rather, with flash floods during the nighttime hours. Again, another resource to be able to use that. It should be in homes and schools and healthcare facilities, places of worship, etc. In your car. I have 3 of them in my that are operational here in my home and in my car right now. So I practice what I preach, and I hope everybody else follows suit.
I just feel like I've heard Bruce Jones talking to us, Bill.
Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah, Bruce
would
and
be
I know
proud.
each other too, of course. Yes.
Yeah, preach on, brother, preach on. I mean, no,
Bruce will be back with us in the spring.
Yeah, it's just like it's, and I'm not going to get into it now, but it's shocking how few people have one of these where we are in one of the most tornado-prone parts of the United States, and we got to fix that. But that's
James. Can I share a story on that real quick?
Go.
It relates to what Kim was talking about earlier. So it was in January of 2018. There was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake off of Kodiak Island. So it's enough to generate a tsunami warning within a 3-hour travel time. Washington coast is roughly 4 or 5 hours downstream. So a tsunami watch was issued, and this was during the wee hours, 2:30 in the morning. The emergency manager for Grays Harbor County on the central Washington coast had done not 1, but 2 surveys. We had done a lot of work trying to get people to have their own tsunami receipt message with these weather radios. 40% of the population had a weather radio. They got the tsunami watch and were prepared in advance of the potential of a tsunami coming on shore. The problem with a tsunami watch, it only goes on the emergency alert system. It is not shared with wireless emergency alerts, the smartphone alerts. So you had confusion with some people receiving the tsunami watch and others not getting it because they were dependent upon their phones. And that was the issue there. So another reason to have a NOAA Weather Radio as a part of your warning receipt process. And to top it off, what happened in Maui and Lahaina, many people were dependent upon their smartphones. Unfortunately, the cell phone network and the power was out. And even though they put out stuff on wireless emergency alerts, it didn't have the means to be received. And hence, that was part of the problems with the unfortunate loss of life there in the Lahaina area. Back to you, James.
Get a weather radio. All right, Bill Murray, go.
That's the answer.
Yeah, James, one of our team members in Texarkana, which is where I was last Monday night, and I was not actually on a pub crawl. I was in a bowling alley, of all things. You'd been proud of me. I bowled a 154. That was pretty good for me. But there was a young man who one of the team members family members, their son, who was so petrified of the weather in the 11th grade, at 11 years old in the 6th grade, that he couldn't go to school on days when there was bad weather. And they get their share of bad weather in Texarkana. And one day when he was home, he actually, began to worry about the cloud formations outside. And he called 911 and said, I'm really scared, and I'm afraid a tornado is going to form. And the police in Texarkana were really sweet and went over and talked to him and waited for his mom to get home. And, but she said, how can I help my son? And so I loaded up for Bear and, took him out to lunch on Sunday and, brought him one of those little portable weather radios, because I told her to get the same radio that you had there, Ted, but, gave him that little handheld portable one and, talked to him about the weather service and, how these 3,500 men and women are there, protecting him every day, day in and day out, and gave him some cool stuff. And she says he's just flying high. I think we got another meteorologist in the fold here in the future there in Texarkana. That's another story, like for me, turning fear to fascination. I'm going to make my pick of the week the North Sound Weather Minute, which is the podcast that Ted produces. It reminds me of the old Weather Notebook show that ran on public radio stations back in the early 2000s. Brian Yaten and that outstanding podcast. The Ted's podcast is the polar opposite of ours. His is 1.5 to 2 minutes long, so it's a bite-sized podcast that you can consume in easy, on your own terms there whenever you get a chance. But he has some great topics, and that's how I found him. And so we really enjoyed having you on tonight, Ted. Glad we can make it happen.
Well, thank you for having me. And can I share one more story with Jen here in just a moment?
Please.
Okay. Again, I'm the chair of the State Emergency Communications Committee, and I share this story in the Climate Adaptation for Emergency Managers FEMA course. You might remember the tragic Andover tornado in April of 1991. Took 24 lives, as I recall. We had a very similar event here just recently. And keep in mind, a lot of homes have been built in the Andover area with population growth, et cetera. But very similar kind of event. But because of enhancements in public warning process, whether it's the technology from detection and warning to the dissemination of warning messages in a variety of ways, from wireless emergency alerts, the emergency alert system, all the broadcasters are involved, etc. There were no lives lost in that event, and a sharp contrast to what happened in 1991. Jen, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Very good.
To me, that is a success story. Yes, there was the loss of homes and property, etc., but no lives lost. That's the important thing.
That's the name of the game. All right. I think, Bill Murray, anything else we need to talk about, or are you good on your end?
Good on my end. I was going to mention some of the guests that are coming up, but I somehow have navigated away from that. Let me pull that up real quick here if I can. And
typically you promote coming episodes at this time.
Yeah, that's my
wrap
job,
it up,
isn't it?
Coming to a theater near you.
And I got to get working on next week's show because it's almost here. Brian Smith is going to join us, the WCM from Omaha, who just recently retired, as we continue our retirement theme here. Jeremy Bauer.
Good guy.
Yeah, we're covering the WCMs and the retirements. Jeremy Bauer, of course, good friend of the podcast, is going to join us too, because it was his suggestion, and I'm going to try to have that author on about the Denora event for a little short period there, so we can talk about his book, which came out earlier this year. We're going to go to Slovenia on November 6th and talk to meteorologist Tanya Segnar. That's going to be a fun show. And what else? Ashley Gann, local Alabama meteorologist, is going to join us. She's taking a career turn and is at Auburn University now in emergency management. Ashley's a very, very nice person and somebody we're going to enjoy having on the show, since she's no longer working for the competition, James Spann.
No, that's great. She's a very nice person. I can't wait to talk to her. It'll be a lot of fun. And listen, we gotta wrap this thing up here. We're a little late here, but listen, if you're new, Weather Brains is typically on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And you can watch it live on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/weatherbrains. But most of you listen to the audio podcast, but however you consume this, thank you so much for being part of our family. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
And our first WeatherBrains baked good, James.
Yes, I mean this. I'm
impressive.
going to enjoy one of these mere moments.
Go for it. I'm so jealous.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great week.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank-